Did you listen to Jeff and Professor Hamo in the morning? Here's what you missed.
Where are my quotes? We're going to get some quotes ready. We're going to let you listen to some quotes. Today, South Africa goes to the polls. As you know, their first multi-party election was back in 1994. This time, 25 years ago, the likes of Nelson Mandela voted for the very first time in their lives at the age of 73. Can you imagine? And most, or rather all black people voted for the very first time 25 years ago. Yes, and it's been a turbulent 25 years. It all hasn't been rosy, despite the fact that South Africa is no doubt Africa's most industrialized country, the biggest economy on the continent. But still, challenges remain. Racism is still rampant. Xenophobia is still rampant. Crime is still rampant. Can you imagine that Johannesburg was voted the murder capital of the world a few years ago? So they still have challenges for all their 50 plus million people. The ANC has been in power since 1994 and is still expected to retain power, but it's being chewed away, slowly being eroded by the likes of the DA and also EFCC, that's what it's called, Julius Malema's EFF, the EFF, Julius Malema's party. So, lots of challenges. We'll talk about that coming up in a little short while. Called Milton. Mafikizolo Dihamba Nawe. What a song. Zinzi's loving this song as we speak. She is jamming in her Tswana-ness. Tswana, right, Cliff? Is it Tswana? Yeah. Election Day 2019. But it wasn't always that way in a country called Azania, South Africa, 1994. This was Election Day, or Freedom Day, as they call it. It's a national holiday, and they call it Freedom Day. This was Freedom Day, 1994. Katiba Clyde. Let's take a listen.
Africans were so faithfully discharged their duty to their communities, to their fellow citizens, and indeed to their country. Together, the distinguished recipients of the national orders represent the values, the ideals, and aspirations of millions of South Africans who stood in unending lines on the 27th of April 1994 to vote for freedom. The men and women we honor today have scaled the heights, but we know too well that these do not yet represent the pinnacle of their achievements. Today, your country has honored you, but it is an honor that should inspire you to set even greater goals. You have done your duty. You have made your country proud, and its citizens proud as well. You fully deserve the highest praise of being called citizens of South Africa and citizens of the world. Under the powers vested in me by the Constitution of the Republic of South Africa, I now confer the Order of Mendi, the Order of Inkamanga, the Order of Baobab, the Order of Lutuli, the Order of Mapungubia, and the Order of the Companions of O.R. Tambo. The recipients of these orders shall henceforth be honored as esteemed members of the orders. The people of South Africa salute them all, and we should salute them as well. Thank you.
Go on, go on. Oh my goodness. Goosebumps. The hair on the back of my neck. I remember that day like it was yesterday. 25 years ago. Unbelievable how the country emerged. By the way, it wasn't all that rosy. After Mandela was released from prison in 1990, February 11th, the country was in turmoil for 4 years. Turmoil. Internal turmoil. The tribal fighting and the tribal killings that were going on were incredible, were horrific. Between the Zulu and the Inkatha Freedom Party and the ANC. It was horrible, mostly in the townships. They were killing each other, hacking each other. They couldn't decide who would take over. For a while, it looked like the country was going to plummet into outright civil war. But then one day Mandela called them all together. The late great Nelson Mandela called all the tribes together and he told them, this is not what we went to prison for. We went to prison so that we can come out and vote as a nation. And just like that, the fighting stopped. They went to the polls. Nelson Mandela was elected as the first ever black president. And he said, I'm going to be in power. I'm going to rule for just one term. And he did exactly that. 1999, 5 years later, he gave way to an incredible gentleman. He had a choice, actually. He had a choice as to who he would pick as his successor. Everybody thought it was going to be one Cyril Ramaphosa. He was the guy who was at the forefront. And he didn't. Instead, he picked the man who was actually the mastermind, the brains behind the ANC in exile. Because you know, a lot of ANC stalwarts were in prison, right? In Robben Island and other places. But the others who were in exile were the ones who were running the movement from the outside. And the one person who was actually the brains, the mastermind, the one who kept the movement going in exile, a gentleman by the name of Thabo Mbeki. Now, he was the one who was picked by Mandela to succeed him. And right before he was picked to be president, Thabo Mbeki gave a speech I will never, ever forget. If you look it up on YouTube, we're going to play a bit of it right now. It's called I Am an African. Thabo Mbeki stood in Parliament in Cape Town and made this speech. Unbelievable speech given, I think it was around 1996 in Taiwanese, in the Parliament in Cape Town. I tell you, man, there was not a dry eye in the house, and it still reverberates 23 years later. Unbelievable. Great speech by Thabo Mbeki. He went on to be president for almost 2 terms, and then the ANC, in all its wisdom, kicked him out. Can you imagine? The man who was the brains behind the ANC, especially when it was in exile, when it was a banned movement. And by the way, Thabo Mbeki, I've said this story, I've told this story before, he paid the ultimate price while in exile. Because they used to move from place to place, house to house, country to country, and there were some frontline states, you know, Zambia, Tanzania, other frontline states that were very friendly to exile, the ANC in exile. And one day Thabo was supposed to meet his son, as it had been arranged many times, and he was supposed to meet his son at a certain location in Zambia, and Thabo arrived as always on time, and his son never arrived, and he waited, and Thabo thought, oh, maybe it got delayed, the flight got delayed, or the drive got delayed, so, you know, he didn't think much of it. And waited, and then he left after a while because of security concerns. And then, you know, later, a day later, a week later, a month later, a year later, nothing was ever found, or traces of his son. He was abducted, he was killed, obviously. Young son, 18 years old then. And his body, to this day, was never found. The only child that Thabo had was abducted and killed and the body dumped somewhere or dipped in acid or whatever it was that the South African security forces did to it. And even during the Truth and Reconciliation period, remember that time Desmond Tutu had chaired that outfit? They tried to get some policemen just to say, because you say the truth and you're forgiven. And none of the policemen could say. I think they did admit that Tabo's son was killed, but they could never tell or say where the young boy was abducted or killed or where his body was taken. It was sort of like our very own Dedan Kimathi here in Kamiti Prison. Nobody knows where the body was dumped or where the body ended up. Just like Tabo's son, paying the ultimate price, and then the ANC, in all its wisdom, turns around and kicks him out of the presidency. Can you imagine? But he still remains a member of the ANC to this day. Once you join the ANC, you can never leave. It's a lifetime commitment. So anyway, they kick Thabo out. They bring in his deputy. Well, you know who? Jacob Zuma. And my goodness, what a mess that was. Controversy after controversy, scandal after scandal, up until he had to also be kicked out by the same ANC. And they decided, okay, it's time for some stability, for some sanity. A couple of years ago, they brought on, what do they call it? A businessman, philanthropist, and someone to stabilize the South African rand, which was free falling at the time, Cyril Ramaphosa. So they brought him in, and now, because he was just brought in as an interim, this is actually the first time he's running for a full term. But you don't pick a president in South Africa. You vote for a party, and of course the party leader automatically becomes the president. So Cyril will most likely retain his presidency. And this is what he said recently at a speech marking 25 years of democracy. Katiba, is that it? Yeah, let's take a listen.
This Freedom Day, fellow South Africans, we have much to celebrate. Most prominent among our achievements has been the promotion of our nationhood in a united, non-racial, and non-sexist democratic South Africa. Although we have achieved much in the past 25 years, we still have a long journey to travel. Just as Madiba said, after climbing one hill and summiting on one hill, and after we have looked at the vista and the beauty that surrounds that hill, we soon realize that
many more hills to be climbed indeed. It's a tough road, folks. You know, like I said, Africa's biggest economy, population of some 55 million people, country about 6-7 times the size of Kenya. Very, very rich, very wealthy, but the differences between rich and poor, the haves and the have-nots, are still stark. There's still racism, there's still tribalism, and something called xenophobia, a fear of foreigners, because a lot of foreigners working in South Africa, and the South African blacks think that a lot of their jobs are being taken away from them. So it's a tough uphill climb, but it was always the hope of the continent, and it has to pull through. Otherwise, Nelson Mandela's dream and goal and people like him would have just gone to become nothing at all. So there is a lot of hope and a lot of opposition as well. In the beginning, it was all ANC winning 80-90%. Now there's another outfit called the Democratic Alliance, which was always there. In fact, it dominates one province out of 10 provinces. It's called the Western Province. That's where Cape Town and other big towns are. DA is very prominent over there, and they've been making inroads, and they say this year might win up to 20%. So ANC's stranglehold on the power is being eroded. And this is what the DA, Democratic Alliance, had to say just recently before these elections. The EFF, Julius Malema's party, also making inroads, also appealing especially to the young people. It's going to be very interesting. Yes, we know for sure ANC will maintain dominance, but not by much. Last time it won by 62%. This time it might be as low as the lower 50s. So this time it's going to be tough. Next time even tougher. But that's democracy for you folks. That's democracy, and it shows. It's maybe a young democracy, half as young as we are at 25 years. But you know what? They're learning every time. Every time. I hope we would do the same as well. So happy Freedom Day to all South Africans. Happy Voting Day, rather. Voting Day to all South Africans, and wishing them all the very best. And as Brenda Fassie used to say, by the way, this was a theme song in one of Thabo Mbeki's elections. Brenda Fassie was out there on stage singing this song. It actually means, make way, we are coming. Make way, we are coming. The late great Brenda Fassie. Here we go.
Professor Hamo every day, Monday to Friday from 6 a.m. to 10 a.m. only on Hot 96.